Hi, Danielle here from BCO, and today I have two very special guests with me. Former NASA astronaut Dan Tani and future astronaut Sarah. And we're going to talk a little bit about the astronaut experience. So Sarah has some questions already prepared. You want to ask away?
Okay, because I want to be an astronaut when I'm older, what subject would you recommend me studying my hardest on?
Ooh, what subjects? Is that what your question? Well, so almost to be an astronaut, at least at NASA, you have to have a college degree in either science, math, or engineering. And so generally you're going to have to do some technical stuff. So study your maths, right? And pay attention in science, okay? And because most of us are technical in nature, doctors or engineers or scientists. So those are the subjects that you're going to want to do well in and pay attention to the most.
Oh, yeah,
Okay?
Was there more scarier rides you've been on than going in the space station?
Is there more scary rides that I've been on than going to the space station?
Yeah, like roller coasters and stuff.
Well, I was going to say I drive the Kinsale Road from the airport to Kinsale, and that is really scary. But I love those scary rides at the amusement parks. I love roller coasters, and you know what? I don't really like the spinny rides around because my stomach doesn't feel great after those. But I love the ones that go fast and high and zip around.
Was there Wi-Fi up in space?
Well, we have a Wi-Fi network in space, but it doesn't connect to the internet. So we use them to connect all the computers together, so we can connect all the computers to a central computer. Now, when the space station can see the right satellites, we can connect the network to the ground network via satellite. And nowadays, not when I was there, but nowadays they can get a very slow internet connection that way. But we use mainly what we do with that connection is we send files back and forth, and then we can also make phone calls over that network, because you can make voice phone calls over the computer network.
Yeah. What was your favorite thing to do up in space?
There's two things that I would say were my favorite things, and then they would flip, number one and number two, or number two and number one, and that was floating around. I loved floating around, and I loved being able to put my feet anywhere I wanted to, or just spin around. So floating is great. And the other is looking out the window at the Earth and seeing our beautiful Earth, and seeing things that are familiar to me, like towns that I know and places that I know, and then also looking at places that I've never seen before, and I wonder what's life like down there. I wonder what people do down there, and I like to think about those things.
Did you ever pass out when you were going on one of the rides, like before?
In the amusement park rides? No. So fortunately, I have never passed out on those things. I'm usually screaming too much and yelling and and laughing too much.
Okay, that's pretty much all I wanted to ask you.
Those are great questions, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
I can't wait to see Sarah, the first Irish astronaut in space. So I'll be able to say I knew her when she was just learning to be an astronaut.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know it's going to happen because Sarah's always here talking about, I'm going to be an astronaut. I just finished my astronaut book, right? You were reading online too? Or reading, whose book was it? Chris Hadfield?
Oh, Chris,
so she's really passionate about being an astronaut, so keep an eye on this one here.
All right, good deal.
So I just have a few questions for you. Now, for me growing up in the US, shuttle missions were the talk about space. And you talk about NASA, it was the shuttle mission. So for you growing up, was Apollo kind of that for you? Was that something that was in the ether, if you say? Like,
so when I was, so we, 50 years ago when we were landing on the moon, I was 8 years old. And so, I have really strong memories of everybody and everything was space crazy. Because we were, of course the astronauts were our heroes, but we all had astronaut toys and astronaut lunch boxes and astronaut costumes. And so I remember really knowing everything about the machines and the people that were going to the moon. And then we stopped flying the Apollo in 1972. We went to a space lab in 1974. But then, when I was in like high school and early college, we didn't have any access to space because we hadn't flown the space shuttle yet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so there was 10 years where we weren't flying anything into space, and I was so I wasn't keenly aware of what we were doing. Of course, they were developing the space shuttle. But then when I was in college, we started flying the space shuttle, and then you're right, everybody was all excited about the space shuttle, watching the launches and following the missions.
That's interesting now that you're saying it, because I think about it, even for me growing up, it was shuttle mission, shuttle mission, shuttle mission, shuttle stopped, and then there was kind of a lull.
Right,
You didn't really hear about space at all. So that's kind of the same. I do hear people talk about all of the space craze and everything happening, but then you also kind of had that lull in between.
Right, we stopped flying the space shuttle in 2011, 8 years ago, and a lot of people mistakenly say, well, we don't have a space program anymore. But of course we do, because we're sending astronauts to the space station. We just don't have a rocket that carries people anymore right now. That's going to change hopefully next year. The next couple of years we're going to fully utilize some rockets that are made by private companies, and then NASA is working on their own exploration spacecraft and rocket too. So a lot of people are aware of the space program because of what they see on TV, and so when we're not launching, people can easily forget that we have an active space program.
Yeah, and it was really alive in the U.S. I know, like, even looking at pictures back then, even the way the cars were shaped, they were designed like a rocket, and everything was like that.
Everything was space crazy.
Everything was space crazy, and so I feel like that's kind of picking up again.
I hope so.
If you notice, I mean, the attire here, we all sort of match. Space might be cool again. I don't think it's ever not cool though. Space has always been cool.
But it's coming back actually right now. What's really exciting is that not only are we flying people to space, but we are flying satellites to space that are. Satellites used to be huge, bigger and bigger and bigger, the size of a refrigerator, the size of a car, the size of a big truck, and now satellites are getting to be this big, and which means that even like universities, maybe even some high schools, can build their own satellites, and they're functional satellites, and it's amazing. The miniaturization has gotten to the point where now almost any school can figure out how to build a satellite and try to get it launched.
So I think maybe what's changed is it's gone from space being so proprietary to now space is more accessible.
Exactly right.
And so really interesting.
And because of that, there's a lot of small companies that are getting involved in space. So the space industry is growing with lots of little companies. It used to be like 3 big, huge companies, and now there's dozens of little companies that are contributing.
So when you're saying that you remember the Apollo mission, is there something that stands out to you of any of the missions that, or maybe your first memory of Apollo? What's the first thing?
Well,
which mission do you remember?
Well, I of course 11, right? So the landing on the moon, and it felt like the entire world was centered around one event, and a good event, right? And so I mean, that's really the memory I have. I also remember being absorbed like Sarah about everything about the Apollo mission. So I knew I knew everything about the rocket, I knew everything about the spacecraft, we knew most of the astronauts by name, and so I remember loving that part of just, all the machinery and all the things that have to happen to get people to the moon.
And you ended up being an engineer, so was that something that do you think that maybe influenced your path and like how you...
Probably, really cool machines. I mean, that's when you get to work with them or build them or design them. I eventually found out that engineering was all about that, making things and improving things and getting to break them and figure out how they break. And so that's really how I learned to, that engineering was exactly all that stuff, and that's why I went into it.
I mean, how could it not be when the Saturn V is on your television and you're exposed to that kind of machinery all the time?
Exactly right, yeah.
Even today, it's an incredibly impressive machine.
Yep, and you can go visit them. There's 3 of them on display in America, and so you can go walk around and see what a huge machine it was, and think that it was made before computers, that it was designed and put together before there were computers. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were saying, parts of it were built in New York and parts of it were built in California, and if you changed one part of the design and the thing that was being built in California, you had to let them know in New York, and nowadays you would just type it in, boop, and it would go off. Back then they would have to change the drawing by pencil, and then they have to make a copy, fly it across the country. They'd have to get that, and they go, okay. So think of that, how difficult it was to build such a complex vehicle back in the days before computer data that we get back and forth.
Kind of even makes it more, not that I ever thought it could be more impressive.
It's more awesome. Exactly right.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, we're really excited about the Apollo 50 anniversary coming, which I'm sure you are
so am
well,
I, right.
Do you have any big plans for celebration?
So I have non-space commitments on that day.
Non-space commitments.
So I have to actually be on my way to Japan on that day.
Oh, okay.
And so I will enjoy the 50th anniversary with everybody else, but I'll have to do it in transit as I jet across the world.
It'll be interesting to see how, it being in another country and not being in the U.S., how they'll be
how
celebrating
they celebrate
there.
it.
And,
yeah. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, you have to let us know.
Yeah, I will.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And our wonderful interviewer here, Sarah. Thank you
Good
very
job,
much,
Sarah.
Sarah. And for more information, check our website. We'll be doing some more celebration of the 50th anniversary on the anniversary coming up. So check our website at BCO, and we'll talk to you very soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.